Now, periodically I'll check the periscope because, to put it simply, I was lazy about mathematics, because obviously you want to put your periscope up as little as possible in real life, and so you want to count down the range to the target. Once you know what the range is, you want to compare that to your speed and to the time that passes, so that when you put the periscope back up, you can actually fire. In this case, I was being lazy and not doing the math, and so when it felt right, I put up the periscope to see if my range was correct. I would imagine a lot of people in World War II actually did that, because even in World War II, I would imagine not everybody wanted to be doing mental math when they were in a battle, especially because they didn't necessarily know where that Japanese ship was going to be anyway, if it was a real combat situation. Because obviously the Japanese ships would zigzag just like the Allied ones, and they would be going varying speeds. And without modern radar, you could argue, it was kind of difficult to clock speeds of targets. And of course, one other problem with radar is that it pinpoints your position. You can see them, but they can also see you from your radar signal, which you don't necessarily want. In fact, you definitely don't want it. One of the paradoxes of putting radar in a submarine. But as I said, in this scenario, your radar is inoperable. So I just put up the scope to check the range with the computer there, and I'm still too far away. So I put the scope down to let the sub get a bit closer, and this is where I started to put the scope up and down to continue checking the range, which, as I said, is probably not the correct way to do it. But it's what I did. Scope up. And down scope, because we're still much too far away. So zooming in here to see if I can see the Hulk there, and I can. So up scope, and I'm almost in range for a Mark 14 or Mark 18 torpedo. But if you were paying attention earlier, you would notice that because the sub is so old, it's got Mark 10 torpedoes, which have a range of only 3,500 yards. So I have to actually get arguably dangerously close to the target in order to fire. Again, luckily this is not real life, and if it were, these are only scrap hulks. These are not actual Japanese targets, so there are no destroyers to worry about. Up scope again. Still too far away. You see what I mean? Like, I had to put up the scope a whole bunch of times, and probably I should have just done a math calculation at the beginning to know exactly when to put the scope up again and fire. Now, if you notice the way the sub is aligned, once I take out that closest hulk, I can turn due north and then take the second without a whole lot of adjustment, which I will do. So up scope, still too far away, but I've switched on the torpedo data computer here, trying to line up the scope as best I can. I shut it off. One of the things is that to adjust the periscope, you have to shut the data computer off, then switch it back on when you're ready. So it's back on. You use the slash key to switch it on and off, incidentally. My submarine's track is not perfect, and so it keeps pulling my periscope off target there. And as you could see, I was still out of range. So I put down the scope and let the sub move in a little bit more. One other thing to note is if you want to center your rudder, you don't use the return key because the return key fires your torpedo. Instead, what I do is I just click the opposite direction arrow and it'll center the rudder. Same thing with diving and surfacing. Now, I just fired the torpedo using the return key. I put down the scope and now I'm watching the moving map here. Not true to life, of course, because in World War II they didn't have this kind of technology. In fact, in 1990, when they made the game, they did not have this technology for maybe anything but a military vehicle, like a submarine. This would have been state-of-the-art in 1990. Never mind World War II. So that's a hit. But that ship is not going down for the moment, so I'll fire again, hitting the return key again on the same target track. If that's the right term. The same track. Let's just say the same track, not get fancy. I shouldn't try to pretend that I know more about this than I really do. As I said, I've never been in the Navy. So, that torpedo looks like it's going to hit. And it does. And now that ship's going down.